Just a few days ago, I had one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. You see, with all the clown sightings and stories floating around, I figured I'd eventually encounter one of these creepy figures, but I never expected it to happen the way it did. I live in a rural area of Maine, surrounded by dense forests and tall, imposing trees that cast long shadows even during the day. My driveway is long and winding, a path that cuts through the trees, leading up to the main road. It's the kind of place where you can feel completely isolated from the rest of the world, which is usually a blessing, but not that day. It started out as a normal afternoon. I was outside, working on cutting down a drooping branch that was hanging too low near the entrance to my property. The day was overcast, the kind of dull gray that blankets everything in a somber light. That's when I first saw him, a figure slowly walking down the side of the road. At first, I couldn't make out much detail, just the bright, gaudy colors that clashed with the muted tones of the day. As he got closer, I realized it was a clown, a person dressed as a clown, to be exact. But the costume was something out of a nightmare. The clown stopped right at the center of the start of my driveway, his movement slow and deliberate. He turned his head to face me, but his body remained facing the road. The way he moved was unsettling, almost robotic, as if he wasn't fully in control of his own limbs. The mask he wore was horrifying, not the kind you'd see at a children's birthday party. This mask was grotesque, with exaggerated features twisted into a permanent sneer. The bright red lips stretched into a jagged smile that didn't reach the lifeless eyes staring back at me. For a moment, I was frozen in place, my hands gripping the saw so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I tried to convince myself that it was just a prank, that this was some idiot trying to scare people for kicks. But there was something in the way he stood there, unmoving, that sent a chill down my spine. I forced myself to smile, trying to appear unfazed, and even chuckled nervously, expecting him to start bluff charging at me like I heard in other stories. But he didn't. He just turned his head back towards the road and continued walking, each step measured and deliberate. I watched him until he disappeared down the road, my heart still pounding in my chest. I wanted to say something, to call out to him or even confront him, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I shook my head and tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just some weirdo with too much time on his hands. I went back to work, but the image of that clown lingered in the back of my mind, like a dark cloud casting a shadow over everything I did. That night, after I'd finished my usual routine of locking up the shed and turning off the lights, I headed inside to make dinner. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every little creak and rustle. As I stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, I thought I heard something outside, a faint sound, almost like someone was shuffling around. I paused, my knife hovering in midair, and listened intently. But all I could hear was the wind rustling through the trees and the distant sound of leaves being blown across the ground. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling gnawing at my insides and went back to preparing my meal. But then, out of nowhere, there was a loud, aggressive knock on the kitchen window. My heart skipped a beat, and I nearly dropped the knife. Every muscle in my body tensed up, and a cold wave of fear washed over me. The knock was heavy, like someone was pounding on the glass with their fists. I stood there, frozen, my eyes locked on the window. The darkness outside was impenetrable, the glass reflecting nothing but my own pale, frightened face. I wanted to turn on the light, to see who or what was out there, but I was too afraid of what I might find. My mind raced, playing out all the horrible possibilities. What if it was the clown? What if he had come back? I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there, paralyzed by fear. Slowly, I forced myself to move, inching towards the sliding glass door that led to the patio. My finger hovered over the light switch, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I hesitated, counting to 5 in my head, trying to muster the courage to flick the switch. When I finally did, the patio light flooded the outside area, and my worst fear was confirmed. Standing just a few feet away from the glass door was the same clown from earlier, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, staring directly at me. His eyes, if you could even call them that, were hidden behind the mask, but I could feel his gaze boring into me. The mask's twisted smile seemed even more sinister in the harsh light, as if mocking my terror. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the sound of blood rushing in my ears. I wanted to run, to get away from this nightmare, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. I knew I should confront him, do something to scare him off, but all I could do was stand there, paralyzed with fear. The knife I had been holding slipped from my grasp and clattered to the floor, the sound echoing through the silent house. Before I could even think about what to do next, I turned and bolted upstairs to grab the phone. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely dial 911. As I explained the situation to the operator, I could hear the clown pounding on the glass door downstairs, his blows growing more frantic and aggressive with each passing second. His screams, those blood-curdling screams, echoed through the house, mingling with the sound of the pounding to create a symphony of terror. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity, and I was convinced that the police would never arrive in time. The fear was so overwhelming that I could hardly think straight. I could feel the walls closing in on me, trapping me in this nightmare with no way out. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the screaming and pounding suddenly stopped. The silence was almost as terrifying as the noise had been. I crept over to the window, my heart still racing, and looked out into the yard. That's when I saw him, Mark, my neighbor, storming across the lawn with a rifle in hand. He was shouting at the clown, his voice booming through the night air, telling him to get the hell out of here. The clown hesitated for a moment, as if contemplating whether to stay or flee, but then he turned and bolted into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding and rushed downstairs to thank Mark. The police arrived shortly after, their blue and red lights casting an eerie glow over the property. They took my statement, did a quick sweep of the area, but found nothing. The clown was gone, vanished into the night like a bad dream. Mark offered to let me stay at his place for the night, and I gladly accepted. There was no way I was going to sleep in that house alone after what had just happened. It's been a few days since the encounter, but I still can't shake the feeling that the clown could come back. Every time I hear a noise outside, my heart skips a beat, and I'm back in that moment, staring into the eyes of that masked figure. This whole clown craze is terrifying, but experiencing it firsthand is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. There's been a lot of talk lately about clowns terrorizing people, but what happened at my school last week was something I never expected. It all started when an Instagram account popped up, supposedly run by clowns who were threatening to come to our school. At first, no one took it seriously, but as more and more people started talking about it, the rumors spread like wildfire. The school administration decided to involve the police, and soon enough, even the SWAT team was on alert. The clowns had reportedly said they would show up around 11 a.m., so by the time 11 o'clock rolled around, the entire school was on edge. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and everyone was whispering nervously to one another, eyes darting towards the windows and doors. I tried to stay calm, convincing myself that it was all just a prank, that nothing would actually happen. After all, there had been other clown sightings that turned out to be nothing more than kids playing tricks. But then, at 11:15, our vice principal's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, sounding more strained than I'd ever heard before. "We are now going into lockdown. Please shut the doors and lock the windows." My heart dropped into my stomach. This was real. We'd all sprang into action, following the lockdown procedure we'd practiced so many times before. The teacher quickly locked the door, and we huddled in the corner of the room, out of sight from the windows. The room fell into an eerie silence, the only sound the nervous shuffling of students trying to get comfortable in the cramped space. Time seemed to stretch on forever. Every minute felt like an hour as we sat there in the darkness, waiting, listening for any sound that might signal danger. My mind raced with possibilities. What if the clowns really did come? What if they got into the school? The stories of clowns hurting people, attacking them, flashed through my mind, each one more horrifying than the last. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the vice principal's voice came over the intercom again, telling us that it was the end of the day and we were free to go home. I breathed a sigh of relief, the tension in the room dissipating as everyone began to gather their things. But that relief was short-lived. My house is about a mile away from the school, and normally, The walk home takes about 20 minutes. I'd always enjoyed the walk, especially on nice days, but that day was different. As I started down the road, earbuds in, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The memory of the lockdown was still fresh in my mind, and every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made me jump. About 5 minutes into my walk, I passed by a strip of forest that lines part of the road. It's a place I've walked by hundreds of times, but that day it felt different. The trees seemed to loom larger, the shadows darker and more menacing. That's when I saw it, something bright, a splash of color amidst the green and brown of the forest. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light. But when I looked back, I saw it clearly, a figure dressed in a clown costume, standing among the trees. The outfit was dirty and torn, the colors faded, but the mask was horrifying. A twisted, exaggerated grin with wild red hair poking out in all directions. The clown was just standing there, staring at me with its head tilted to the side, as if sizing me up. Then, out of nowhere, it started laughing, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that sent chills down my spine. And then it started running. Panic surged through me, and I screamed, dropping my bag as I turned and bolted back towards the school. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I didn't dare look back, didn't want to see how close the clown was. All I could do was run, my legs burning with the effort. When I finally reached the school, I found a police officer standing near the entrance. I must have looked like a madman, out of breath and wild-eyed as I tried to explain what had happened. He cursed under his breath, calling for backup as he jumped into his car and sped off in the direction I had come from. I don't know if they ever caught the clown. Rumors flew around the school that day. Some said a clown had actually walked up to the front door, threatening to come in. Others claimed to have seen clowns lurking in the woods, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But no one knew for sure. The next day, the police were back at the school, patrolling the area, searching the woods. But the clowns were gone, vanished without a trace. And that's what scares me the most, that they're still out there, free to terrorize more people. Every time I walk by those woods now, I can't help but look over my shoulder, half expecting to see that clown standing there, waiting for me. It was a Friday night, October 7th, 2016, and I was walking home from my friend's house. It was late, around 1 a.m., and I was feeling a little buzz from the few drinks we'd had. The night was cool, the air crisp as it brushed against my skin, and the streets were deserted, with only the occasional flicker of a streetlight breaking the darkness. My friend lives almost a mile away from my house, and normally I would have just walked along the road, but there's a trail through the woods that cuts the distance in half. It's a shortcut I've taken countless times during the day, but at night, those woods take on a completely different character. They're dark, dense, and foreboding, the kind of place that makes you feel like you're not alone, even when you know you are. That night, I hesitated at the entrance to the trail. The darkness seemed to stretch on forever, the trees closing in like the walls of a tunnel. I could barely see a few feet in front of me, the only light coming from the screen of my phone. I was wary, but I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, I'd been through these woods at night before, and nothing had ever happened. So I took a deep breath and stepped into the woods, the sound of my footsteps crunching on the leaves echoing in the stillness. The trail was narrow, winding through the trees, and I kept my phone's flashlight pointed ahead of me, guiding my way. The deeper I went, the more uneasy I felt, as if the darkness was pressing in on me from all sides. Then about 50 yards in, I heard something, noises coming from up ahead. I froze, my heart skipping the beat as I strained to listen. It sounded like footsteps, but not just one person. There were at least two, maybe more. My mind immediately went to the stories I'd heard about clowns terrorizing people, and a cold knot of fear formed in the pit of my stomach. I quickly turned off my phone's flashlight, covering it with my hand to avoid drawing attention to myself. I stepped off the trail, hiding behind a large tree, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The footsteps were getting closer, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot growing louder. I peered around the tree, and that's when I saw them. Two figures moving through the darkness, their clown costumes unmistakable even in the dim light. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Two clowns, right here in the woods, in the middle of the night. It felt surreal, like something out of a horror movie. I could barely make out their faces, but the way they moved, the way they stopped suddenly, made it clear they knew I was there. My heart was racing, my mind screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. I was trapped, and they were closing in. For what felt like an eternity, we stood there, frozen in a silent standoff. Then, as if coming to some unspoken agreement, the clowns started moving again, walking down the trail as if nothing had happened. I waited until they were far enough away, then bolted from my hiding spot, sprinting through the woods towards my house. My feet barely touched the ground as I ran, driven by pure adrenaline. When I finally burst out of the woods and onto the street, I didn't stop until I was inside my house, slamming the door shut behind me. My mom was already asleep, so I tried to be quiet as I went around the house, locking every door and shutting every blind. But when I reached the living room, I froze. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see them, the clowns, standing across the street, watching my house. They were still, like statues, their faces hidden behind those grotesque masks. I couldn't tell if they were looking directly at me, but I knew they were there to scare me. I rushed to my mom's room, shaking her awake, and she grabbed her pepper spray, storming over to the window. But by the time she looked, the clowns were gone. She believed me, of course. She's my mom. She didn't brush it off or tell me I was seeing things. The next day, she called the police and reported the incident, but I knew deep down that it wouldn't do any good. The clowns had disappeared, and they weren't coming back, at least not right away. But that wasn't the end of it. Last night, I saw one of them again, standing in the same spot across the street, staring at my house. This time, I didn't panic. I watched him for a long time, my eyes locked on his figure, waiting for him to move. But he didn't. He just stood there, silent and still, as if waiting for me to make the first move. I don't know how long I stood there, watching him, but eventually I went to bed, too exhausted to care anymore. But the fear is still there, lurking in the back of my mind. I know they'll be back, and next time I'll be ready. I'll get a picture, a video, something to prove that this is all real, because no one should have to go through what I did, and people need to know that these clowns are still out there, waiting, watching, and ready to strike. If you've made it this far, you're 100% a horror fanatic, and we approve. If you love our campfire-themed horror storytelling experience, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our daily uploads.